Tales for Dark Nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Welcome, dear listener, to Fear from the Heartland. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley. Set aside some moments now and take an adventurous ride on a journey into the psyche of some talented writers. They will dig into your being and titillate you. Oh, I love that word, titillate. While the stories may not all take place in the Heartland, I am delivering them to you from the Heartland. My intention is to strike fear and confusion into the mind, soul, and yes, the heart. This is Fear from the Heartland. My dearest, I hope this letter finds you doing well. I've found myself stuck in a morose languish. I hope writing to you will release its hold upon me incrementally, as I've become unable to muster the energy to step outside this accursed hotel room. I fear the maids believe I've expired, as the "Do Not Disturb" sign has hung from the doorknob for a week straight. I miss the sound of the waves crashing and your singing as you sit in front of the fire. I also miss the steady clack of your needles as you knit yet another masterpiece to keep us warm in the winter. I miss the touch of your hand upon my shoulder and crooked smile informing me to put my book down and come to bed. This distance is too great between us, and I was meant to stay closer to home. My constitution demands the satisfaction of your lips upon mine. These Appalachian winds carry sickness and fear. I can't stand another breath of them. If they don't send me home to you soon, I fear madness will quite overtake my brain. And the dreams this place gives, a pox upon the mountain breeze and rambling wildlife. The sounds at night are enough to make the spine grow weak, and the mind dips deeply into insanity. I know you are rolling your eyes at me as you read this, thinking I've only caught a case of the overdramatic. You might be right, but be it the untamed wilderness or the lack of you by my side, these dreams take root, and I cannot cast them out. It isn't just me plagued by the accursed things. Why, just this morning as we sat drinking coffee and dining on eggs and bacon and toast, Jeffrey confided in me that his sleep has become a tangle of dark omens. I tried to laugh it off, but inside I felt the cold steel of terror as he described the very same images I have been haunted by. The room grew quiet as he spoke, and I could see the uncomfortable faces of others that had suffered the same visions. None were willing to say anything, but I could see it as clearly as the clouds in the sky. I was asleep, dead asleep. No, strike that, soundly asleep. Better, I was dreaming, not the recurring dream I told you about when I wrote to you last week, the one where you and I picnicked down by the bay. The gulls were crying and the gentle curve of your neck so intoxicating in the afternoon sun. No. I was sound asleep when I heard a tapping on my window. Being in the lodge's third story, my sleeping brain rationalized it as a branch against the pane. My cranky frame stretched up to open the window and trim the offending twig. But as I opened the curtains, I saw no windswept limb. I saw a girl of no more than 13 or so, and she was standing outside my window tapping upon it with a small finger. When she saw me staring back at her, she smiled a smile that carried the warmth of the northern wind in mid-January. It chilled me to the bone to see this mockery of a smile, and I squinted my eyes to better make her out. She was no little girl, this I swear, my love. Perhaps once she had been, but no longer. Her skin was stretched too tightly across her skull and had a faint blue tint to it. Her lips were so dark they could have been black. And those teeth? The teeth in her mouth had been filed to sharp points like a shark any other predatory creature meant for one thing: killing. And she stared at me with that smile that promised blood, not joy, and kept tapping the window. I stumbled back from the window, and she began to moan, a sharp keening sound that felt like rusty nails down the back of my brain. I let the curtains fall closed and hurried back into bed. And a small laugh, filled with menace and promises of pain, filtered through the glass and fabric. I woke with a start and made my way hesitantly towards the window. And as I nervously peered out, I let a soft chuckle as nothing but the treetops and moon greeted me. My heart still hammered in my chest as I lay back down and slept molested by dreams until morning. You probably think it was the result of too much brandy by the fireplace, from smoking my pipe and imbibing with the others while sharing tall tales of the road. And I would tend to agree. You have a knack for seeing right through me like that. But then at breakfast, Jeffrey told of the same evil little minion in his dream as well, down to the smallest detail. We nervously laughed it off, and he burned crimson as he realized how silly he must have sounded. But I tell you, the laughter rang hollow out of my throat. Hollow indeed. Now I sit with a shaking hand on the quill. Excuse the spattering of ink on the page. We can call it the chills of early winter. Yes, let's do that. Not the baseless horror I felt last night and again at breakfast, but the onset of winter in a drafty lodge in the middle of nowhere. Know my every thought is upon you, my love, as we brave another week or two in this desolate place. The surveyors sent word they have narrowed down the richest 3 veins for mining, and once they've finished, we can set our minds to laying out the plans. Then I can catch the train back to you where I belong. I believe this will be my last job for the company. I know I say that each time I head out, but this time, I mean it. I'm so very tired of the road and being away from you. In a few days I will write you, my love, hopefully with news of my return. Love eternally, H. September the 20th, 1878. My dearest, good day, my love. Forgive the lateness in this letter. I had meant to write days ago, but we found ourselves amid crisis, one after another, and time got away from me. I wouldn't say I like this damnable place, truly a blight in this great nation. The natural beauty hides an undercurrent of pure evil, and I swear this. In my last letter, I detailed that we were awaiting word from the surveyors. After days of silence, we decided to send a party to find them and see what the holdup was. A band of the best trackers and hunters in the region says something as this land is as untamed as in the heart of Africa for sure. Filled with all manners of beast and men went feral from lack of civilization. This is the land our grandfathers and great-grandfathers first landed upon after leaving the only homes they ever knew in search of freedom and riches. The search party sends back regular messages to let us know their progress, and so far, after days, they have very little to report. It is as if the forests and mountains opened up and swallowed the surveying crews whole. Old campfires, weeks old, they say, are the only sign they ever existed. We know the direction they were headed towards, but if they ever made it, there is trace to be seen. The locals remain suspiciously hushed about it. Superstitious folk, the lot of them. They make the crosses sign and hurry off when we ask questions about the woods and mountains. It is infuriating to say the least. So we sit doing nothing while awaiting word on the missing men. Any more delays, I doubt I will make it to a city to catch the train home this year. The air smells thick with snow, and the clouds are heavy and block the sun on most days. But I keep optimistic, as it is too easy to slip into a malaise up here. On the dream front, since I wrote to you, the dreams have all but stopped. Now my sleeping head is back to being filled with thoughts of you and I frolicking in the waves and laughing and loving. I fear it was the stress of the situation and cabin fever combined. In fact, the spirits overall are much improved besides the worry about the lost crew. But we all believe they will turn up soon enough. It isn't the first time a crew has gotten turned around in the dense trees and winding creeks up here. The lack of stars and sun to guide them probably has them hunkered down, waiting for the proper chance to make it back. Our meals are back to being filled with laughter and lies told to sell immense laughter. It was an ever-escalating event of frivolity from men desperate to be home but willing to brave it out a while longer. All except poor Jeffrey. The fool ended up cracking open his window during the night a few days past. Now he is suffering from sickness brought on by the chill air in his lungs. The doctors claim he has no signs of illness, just lethargy as far as they see. He mostly sleeps and drinks heavily of the tincture they make locally, a relatively strong concoction capable of taking down a bear, as the locals tell it. I took a drink of it and slept peacefully for nearly 12 hours, so I'll testify to its strength. But don't fear for Jeffrey, he'll pull through this, and possibly learn to leave the windows shut during the cold nights. I must go, my love. I see the wagon pulling near the lodge and hope to hear good news. I shall write sooner, I swear. Until then, know I think of you always and long to feel your lips upon mine. Love eternally. H. September the 28th, 1878. My dearest, the last couple of days have been fraught with ups and downs. I feel torn in multiple directions. As always, I hope this finds you in good spirits. Apologies for the rushed nature of this. I am practically beside myself with glee and sorrow. Where to begin? After the last letter, the search party returned with good and ill tidings. The surveyors have been found holed up in a cave. A pack of ravenous red wolves attacked them. 3 men were lost, bringing the crew down from 9 to 6. Much of the equipment was lost as well, but compared to the 3 souls that have left us, it is a small price. Though the company men higher up do not see it that way. It is a shame when life is worth less than coal. A damn shame. But the surveyors managed to retain their maps, and we will begin to make our plans after the bodies are laid to rest. On that note, in tragic news, Jeffrey has succumbed to his illness. He passed last night in his sleep. The sudden scream from his quiet room awakening all of us and caused a mad scramble to his side. In his sickness, he managed to open his window yet again. His body, though just expired, was as cold as ice and tinged in blue when we got to him. His lips darkened deep red as if chapped severely. A rictus scream of pain was frozen on his face. It shall haunt me seeing him that way. All memories of him standing strong and fierce was replaced by that look of terror. The doctors came to visit his corpse and quickly whisked him away. I got into a great tussle with them over his remains. They insist he be burnt to ash instead of sent home for proper burial in consecrated ground. They demand all of the bodies be burnt. There are no answers given as to why, just solemn marks of the cross from their overly superstitious hands. This whole land feels like it has not progressed since before the War of the States. Simple-minded, God-fearing folk set in their ways. I wonder what they would say about you here, my love. Would their old ways send them into a fit of apoplexy at a Negro woman and white man finding love together? Possibly. I'm not sure they even know of the emancipation of the slaves here. There are only 2 last names on the mountainside, and neither seems willing to crossbreed with the other. Needless to say, I'm glad you are safely at home and far from these savage fools and their untempered belief. I must go. They say the bodies must be burned within a strict time frame according to Scripture. No Scripture I have ever read. It makes me long for the city's civility, the more open-minded people, future-thinking and prone to science over magic. I've given my notice to the bosses that this will be my last job and then home to retirement and start our family. They raised great ballyhoo over this, claimed I'm leaving them in a lurch with the sudden loss of Jeffrey. I don't care. We can plant crops and I can pen my manuscript of our great nation's outlying regions. My life is with you, not them. It should be a week, possibly 2, before I can return to our home. First to lay these brave men to rest, then to plan out the mines. I miss you greatly, my love, and I will be there soon. Until that moment, I shall write to you and keep you detailed on this cursed trip. Love eternally, H. October the 3rd, 1878. My dearest, the dreams are back again. Everyone is on edge. The tapping at my window occurred again 2 nights in a row now. Even in my dreams, I am too frightened to peer out the curtain and see that blue-skinned monster. The townsfolk refuse to answer my questions about her. They will not acknowledge us when we leave the lodge. The first snows have fallen, and now they seem to want us gone. No more than we wish to escape ourselves. It's been 4 days since we burned our fallen comrades. Now another has fallen sick with the mysterious wasting away illness. The bosses refuse to answer our questions and work has ground to a halt. A contingency of fellow workers are talking about just leaving. The bosses swear if they do, they will not be paid for the job. I've tried to be a voice of reason, but there is none to be had in this hell. Everyone is sullen and fearful. I was jumping at every noise. I worry if the sickness doesn't get us, this eerie malaise will. Secretly, I want to leave as well, but we need this final lump payment to settle down and start the farm. How I miss home. You. The clean, salty air and tides were lulling us into a sense of calm and security. The ocean is a balm for the weary mind and soul. Combined with your gentle touch, it is heaven in a world of turmoil. 2 more weeks. That is where I draw the line. After that, I'll be forced to winter here, and I fear I will succumb before it ends. The rooms grow stuffy, and I fear what lies outside the windows at night. 2 more weeks and I leave come hell or heavy snows. Until then, I will keep the peace as well as I can. I will seek answers from the townsfolk in the meantime. Unravel this mystery ailment and ghostly blue girl. I hear boots outside in the hallway. I must go and put out another fire, it seems. I love you, my wife. Hopefully the following letter comes and I will be on my way to you. Love eternally, H. October the 8th, 1878. Matilda. My love, how I miss you. This has turned from bad to worse. The snows fall each night, and soon the roads will be too treacherous to trust. Neither boss nor worker can speak to one another without a threat of violence. 2 more have fallen ill, and 1 has passed on. I've taken to visiting the tavern in town and drinking until I pass out at a table there. This lodge has become oppressive with fear and hostility. I've befriended a few locals. They tell tales of a group of blue-skinned demons that haunt the woods at night. Evil things with fangs and blackened lips that lure men to their doom. It is said they feed upon their souls and leave empty husks behind. They burn the bodies so they do not rise again. I don't know if this is just rural fantasy or accurate, but it chills me to the bone and leaves me weak in the knees. I've decided to leave without the pay promised. Death is not worth chancing over living a fruitful life with you. Even here in the bar, I feel the call in my inebriated sleep. Hear the tapping outside the walls. I shall return to the lodge this evening and pack my belongings and leave at once. It will be my first time returning in days. I hope to leave in the morning if the weather permits. I shall write to you before I go to let you know I'm on my way to your loving embrace. Love eternally, H. October the 13th, 1878. Matilda, my love. I have been trapped in the lodge for 2 days. The night I came to pack, a blizzard swept in and the snow is halfway covering the doors. The sickness has claimed nearly everyone in the lodge. I barricaded the door to my room and pushed the dresser in front of the window. I am huddled in bed with the embers of my fire slowly dying out. I have broken the furniture for fuel and am running desperately low. I need provisions or I shall perish as well. At night, the tapping on the glass has grown to a cacophony. In the halls outside, I hear the scurry of tiny bare feet and insidious laughter. Low rumbling voices of men bed-stricken with illness. And shuffling steps that stop right outside my room. I don't know if this is a plague or some dark magic at work, but I fear if starvation doesn't get me, the sick and dying will. I don't know how to get this letter out to you. I'm only writing it to maintain my sanity and focus. If the snow falls deeper, I should be able to launch myself out the window and land safely below. I'm growing desperate enough to try now as the sun begins to set and before the night horrors start. But I won't. I can last one more night. For you, my love, I will persevere through this madness. Love eternally. H. October the 15th, 1878. Matilda, my dearest, I did it. As the sun rose and the voices stopped this morning, I braced myself and jumped into the deep snow below my window. I twisted my knee and ankle, but the cold has allowed me to keep moving. I write to you from the tavern. The locals are worked up into a frenzy. They speak of burning the lodge down with all the souls trapped inside. I hate myself for saying this, but I agree wholeheartedly with the decision. They could burn the entire woods down and raise the mountainside as well. There is evil here, deep and old evil. The roads are too covered and my body too battered to make the trek to the nearest train station. I shall have to stick it out here until I can make the journey. The locals say it will be 3 days at the least, a week if the storms don't decrease. But I need to leave, to return home. They are gathering kindling to start the blaze now, and if I could, God help me, I would help them. Please pray for their souls and mine, my love. I beg of thee. This must be made right. I love you with all my heart. I'll be there as soon as possible. I swear this. Love eternally, H. October the 16th, 1878. Matilda, what evil have they loosed upon the world? The lodge lies in smoldering ruin. All those men screamed as they were burnt alive and echoed into town. I fear we have damned ourselves from salvation. Now the entire town dreams of tapping on the glass. No place is safe. I'm trapped in a room above the tavern, unable to walk. I hear them scurry upon the roof all through the night. The barkeep says houses are on fire all through the small town as more fall sick. I dream of blue-skinned demons. A fever burns me up, and it is the flames of hell taking me. I should have said no and left when I had the chance. I fear it is too late for me now. Too late for all of us. We've opened the gates, and now they are free to run rampant through the valley. Possibly the world, whatever kept them bound to the lodge, went up in smoke with all those innocent souls. We did this to ourselves. Even now, I hear the bare feet slapping across the timbers above me. Know I love you, Matilda, now and forever. I feel the end coming for me. A group is leaving as the sun rises, and I will try and join them in a wagon. If I cannot, I will send this last letter to them. If I'm not home in a couple of weeks, you'll know what happened to me. I'm so sorry. I never intended to leave you this way. Love eternally, H. October the 20th, 1878. She was on her knees with her right ear glued to the floor. Ellie? Shh, she shushed him. It's been over 30 years since she last welcomed him home with her buttocks up in the air, but back then, the context was a completely different one. Ellie, what are you doing? Shh, she shushed him again with a hiss as an undertone. Elmer placed the paper bag containing their freshly baked bread on the dust-collecting sofa they kept in the hallway. He had wanted to get rid of the old thing ages ago, but his wife didn't let him. It was a wedding present from her mother. He slowly approached the living room, where his wife was bent and crumpled, looking like she spontaneously wanted to pray, but instead got a cramp. The parquet creaked mildly under his careful steps. "Am I missing something?"
Get down here.
Elmer sighed. Neither his age nor his body mass would appreciate what he was about to do. He knelt down next to his wife and tried lowering his face to hers, to see her better.
Lower.
Nope, her hair wasn't stuck in between the floorboards. He ran out of ideas. Elmer sighed again as his hands eased the side of his head to the cold hardwood. Ellie's face, pale as a ghost, didn't even begin to cover it.
Do you hear it?
She hadn't whispered to him in years. Last time she whispered to him was almost a decade prior, when their oldest son came to visit in the middle of the night, and Ellie thought that somebody broke into their house. He liked hearing her whisper. It was a nice change from the constant nagging and complaining. Hear what? There might have been a bug stuck under there somewhere, but Elmer had a hunch his wife was whispering about something else. There was panic in her freckled hands, panic in her dilated pupils.
My name. Can't you hear it? It's calling my name. At first I wasn't sure, but now I'm sure. Can't you hear it? Listen closely.
Elmer stared at his white-haired spouse dumbfounded. Unless Ellie's name was deaf static, he was quite sure he couldn't hear anything. I don't hear anything.
Shh. Listen. Listen.
Nothing.
Did you hear it?
Hear what?
Eliza. It's echoey. Eliza. Like from the bottom of a well.
Elmer's hands helped his torso up again. I don't hear anything. With close to inhumane effort, the old man got up and offered a helping hand to his life partner.
Eliza.
Ellie, I got the bread. We can have breakfast now.
There's something calling your wife from under the floor, and all you can think about is stuffing your fat gut.
So much for the whispering. It was nice while it lasted, Elmer thought. I'll go set the table. He loved her, he really did. But sometimes he had these suspicions. Elmer was already in the kitchen when Ellie called him back in the living room to give her a hand with getting up. The following morning he was welcomed home not by one, but two backsides staring at him from the living room floor. Elmer sighed. The torso attached to the butt, dressed in black, rose to reveal a head. Good afternoon, Father Jonathan. Ah, Elmer, good afternoon.
Shh.
Ellie shushed both of them. Father Jonathan looked at her for a second and then back at Elmer, pressing his lips into a line of mild desperation. Elmer entered his living room with the same caution as the day before. His wife spoke to him from foot level.
They're gone today. Not even I can hear them.
Ellie sat upright and looked the priest dead in the eye.
I think they're afraid of you.
The priest shrugged. Elmer's frame got in between, offering each of them a helping hand. Ellie hesitated.
I wish they would say something while you're here, Father. Elmer, godless as he is, can't hear them, but I was sure you would.
The priest and Elmer exchanged a worried glance. Ellie got to her feet too and caught a glimpse of that exchange.
I'm not crazy, Father.
Nobody said you are, child. Elmer found that sentence quite oxymoronic. The devil works in mysterious ways. However, we must not exclude the possibility of interpretation.
It called me by my name.
Father Jonathan reached a conclusion based on Elmer's facial expressions. I shall bless this room for your peace of mind, child.
The house, Father. Please bless the whole house.
Have you heard it anywhere else?
No, just here, but please bless the whole house.
Elmer left the room. Father Jonathan followed him in the hallway to the couch where he left his cross and holy water, where Ellie's hearing range couldn't reach them. She's old, Elmer. Bear with her. I am, Father. Elmer looked over the priest's shoulder at his wife, who dropped her knees and glued her ear to the floor again. Always have, always will.
Catherine called this morning.
Elmer frowned and let his knife and fork drop on his half-empty plate. And you didn't call me why?
You were out to buy bread.
I doubt you called that early. Ellie gave him an annoyed glance. She always made that face on the few occasions Elmer would raise his voice at her. I was out in the garage. You should have called me. I haven't spoken to her in 2 weeks.
She'll call again.
Elmer and Ellie had 3 children, Eric, Edward, and the apple of Elmer's eyes, Catherine. Catherine was supposed to be named Eleanor, but Eleanor was the name of Elmer's most hated teacher back in school. He had to fight Ellie on that one.
Fine then.
Ellie had said.
You name her if you're so good at this all of a sudden.
And as Elmer stared at the wrinkled little face of the cooing bundle in his arms, he decided, Catherine. This is Daddy's little Kathy. Yes, she is. All 3 children grew up to be fine adults. Eric went to law school and became a very renowned lawyer. Edward was offered a job at a startup firm which grew rather quickly, placing him in a high-up position, despite him never going to university. And Catherine went to med school, but dropped out after 2 years to become a nurse. Ellie was furious with her, not Elmer. Elmer knew why his baby girl decided against med school, even though medicine and helping others had always been her biggest passion.
I can't do it, Daddy.
Kathy cried to him over the phone.
They're so cold. Whenever an operation is a failure, they go back to the patient's family and... Lord, they're so cold. I can't be that cold, Daddy. I don't want to be that cold. There's so much responsibility. Someone's life in your hands. I can't do it. I'm such a lousy coward.
No, baby, Elmer assured her. Everybody I know is a bigger coward than you. You just have a heart of gold. And the world is toughest on people with hearts of gold.
Elmer?
Ellie barely touched her dinner, but as always, she waited for him to notice and ask what's wrong, rather than simply request something else to eat. Not today, Elmer thought. Today he had had a chance to speak to his most precious child, but his wife was too comfortable to go get him on the phone. He felt like he had the right to be a little upset with her.
Elmer, I'm talking to you.
What is it? Ellie played the puppy eye card. I'm sorry if you don't like the Brussels sprouts, but we had to cook them today, or they would have gone bad.
It's not the food, Elmer.
Then what? Ellie was trembling.
I heard it again today.
A cold shiver ran down Elmer's spine. Heard what?
The voice.
Ellie murmured.
In the living room underneath the floorboards. It's back.
Her eyes were glistening. They glistened like that when they found out they were expecting their 3rd child and Ellie wanted to get rid of it. They glistened like that when Ellie asked Elmer to apply for a bank loan to send their oldest son to college. She was reaching out for him. She needed him. An old, drained, distressed old woman reaching out for her rock. Father Jonathan blessed the entire house just last week.
It's still here, Elmer. I heard it again today. Clearer than ever.
You want me to go check again?
No, you won't hear it. Nobody will. It's here for me.
Her lower lip began to vibrate.
I'm going to die, Elmer.
Elmer immediately got out of his chair and went to hold his wife. Ellie was sobbing against the right strap of his suspenders, mumbling something about sorrow and not wanting to go. For her sake, Elmer's composure hardened to iron. You're not going to die, Ellie. Don't you remember what the doctor said last month? He said you're as healthy as can be, and that unless fate plays dirty, you'll live to see your grandchildren reach adulthood. Our oldest grandchild just turned 8, dear. So there's nothing for you to worry about. Ellie was holding on to her husband with such force he would have lost his balance if he were less heavy.
No, it's coming for me. It's... Look at me, Elmer.
Elmer's gaze met Ellie's blurred orbs.
It said I must confess before I go.
Elmer's blood ran cold. Having a voice tell his wife she must confess before she goes was on a completely different word palette than Eliza was. Who did?
The voice, Elmer. It said I must confess.
He knelt down next to her. her hands in his. "Ellie, there is no voice." Ellie pulled her hands out of Elmer's and turned to her untouched dinner again. "Honey, I think you need help."
And why the hell do you think I'm telling all of this to you for?
"Not from me, Ellie. From a professional. We can schedule an appointment with a professional. Maybe Kathy knows somebody."
No!
Ellie grabbed the shoulders of her kneeling husband with crumbling strength.
Don't you dare mention any of this to Catherine. If you must, ask Eric or Edward if they have connections, but don't under any circumstances mention any of this to Catherine. Catherine mustn't know.
"All right. Catherine won't know." Her grip sweetened, and she brought her right palm to her husband's soft cheek. "Do you want me to call Father Jonathan again?"
No, it's not him I need to confess to.
Elmer felt cold at the pits of his arms.
Elmer?
"Yes?" Ellie opened her mouth and closed it again. "You can trust me, Ellie. You can tell me anything. You know that." Her chair creaked as she backed away from the table and got up.
I'm going to bed. I'm tired.
Ellie locked herself in the bedroom, making it clear for Elmer that he had to spend the night in the living room. Whether Ellie was sleeping or not, Elmer knew better than to bother her. He loved her. He really did. Sometimes, however, he simply had these suspicions that were eating away at him. Elmer woke up the following morning to find that the bedroom was empty. He was always the first one to wake up. His wife wasn't in the kitchen either. Elmer didn't even snap his suspenders over his shoulders in his hurry to go outside and call for Ellie. She was at the back gate, the gate they only used when they were going to the baker's. The walk was shorter that way. "Where were you?" The paper bag she was holding made it obvious.
I want to make breakfast today.
The old man watched as his wife was in no hurry to get back inside the house. Ellie was a night person. He, on the other hand, was a morning person. Breakfast was his duty, whereas dinner was hers. It's been like that for the past 4 decades of their marriage, like those cute yet deadly painful routines old couples had. Elmer knew breakfast was his job, and seeing Ellie do it instead felt foreign and unpleasant. He followed his wife inside and stopped in the kitchen doorway. The sizzle of oil was in perfect harmony with Ellie scrambling eggs and the happy birdies outside. She was making French toast. He could tell, even with her back to him. Bacon and spring onions were on the table, just waiting to be chopped. Elmer entered the kitchen and grabbed the knife nearest to him.
No!
Ellie had her arm around the bacon and spring onions in a matter of seconds.
I'll do it!
He froze. Ellie looked like she just jumped in front of a bullet to protect her children. She was even rigid with determination and everything. "Ellie, are you all right?" Elmer put the knife down cautiously. She avoided his gaze.
I want to do it. I need something to do. Go read the paper in your lazy boy or something. I'll call you when it's ready.
Elmer's hand met Ellie's on the knife. "Put it down, love." Ellie gasped softly. He rarely called her love, but whenever he did, her heart would sigh, "I do," over and over again. She put the knife down. "Look at me." She hesitated. Elmer was well accustomed to her dramatic outbursts, but this was different. "What's wrong?" Ellie opened her mouth and closed it right back, just like the night before. "Come on, Eliza, talk to me." Her chin was trembling. "I can't help if you don't speak." She always needed somewhere between 3 to 5 reassurances before she would talk. Sometimes she needed to cry for a good half an hour before she would manage to upright herself enough to speak. Some say you can spend a lifetime alongside a person and never get to know them. But Elmer knew his wife. Oh, he knew his wife really, really well. And despite all her flaws, he really loved her. But he really had some suspicions. Elmer didn't rush her. He held her hand to his chest and looked at her with all the understanding in the world.
I heard it again.
He wouldn't have asked if she hadn't paused. "Hear what, honey?"
The voices calling me.
"From the living room?" Ellie shook her head as salt water was smudging her sight.
Bedroom.
Elmer felt cold in the pits of his arms again. When?
This morning I woke up at 6 a.m. and it was faint. I got closer and there it was again.
The smell of burnt French toast was making Elmer nauseous.
Eliza.
The floor?
Yes.
He had to hold her by the elbows so she wouldn't lose balance. Her whimpers were heartbreaking.
Elmer, you have to believe me.
The bread turned to charcoal. Breakfast was ruined. I believe you, honey, but also believe you need professional help. Ellie shook her head again.
It's not help I need.
She straightened her frame and swallowed her sobs.
I need to confess.
She took her arms out of her husband's grip.
They tell me I need to confess.
Confess to what, honey? The phone rang and Ellie took that as her cue to leave. She stormed out of the kitchen and into the hallway with the agility of a 20-year-old. Elmer got to the stove and turned the thing off before it would burn their entire house down. To his delight, he could hear his wife talking to their daughter. He needed to hear Catherine's voice too, but knew that, this time, his wife needed her more than he did. When they moved in together, the couple established some house rules. 1. No pets, ever. 2. One is just as busy as the other, so the house chores have to be shared equally. 3. 2 meals a day is more than enough. And 4. No matter how bad things get, they are not allowed to keep secrets from each other. This last rule was Elmer's favorite thing about being married to Ellie. When Ellie was young, she was the embodiment of poise. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he had made up his mind the very second he laid eyes on her. It took him no less than 8 months to convince her to go out with him, and when she finally did, Elmer was so nervous he got sick, and they had to cut their date short by 3 hours. He was head over heels for her. Always had been. He regretted nothing. Even so, sometimes he had these suspicions. Ellie had been a sweetheart all week. She made both breakfast and dinner, was using words such as please and thank you again, and to Elmer's mind-numbing surprise, she was cuddling up to him in her sleep. Bedtime was the only time she would enter the bedroom, and whenever she did, she would cling to Elmer like her life depended on it. Entering the living room was out of the question. Therefore, when it came to the house chores, she delightedly accepted her husband's help. Elmer was to take care of the living room and bedroom. All other rooms in the house were in her care, including the attic, which she always hated. 2 weeks passed in which Ellie was distracting herself with housework. Other than the fact that she was deliberately avoiding the living room and bedroom, life was turning back to normal. Until one day, Ellie ran sobbing out of the house directly in her husband's arms, who was reading the newspaper in the garden. He didn't even ask. He just cursed under his breath and waited for his wife to pull herself together and tell him where the voices came from this time.
The attic, Elmer.
He felt so sorry for her. The poor thing was shaking from head to toe, and her sobs were excruciating.
They're in the attic. How, Elmer, and why? The attic is over the kitchen. The voices are over my kitchen, Elmer. They've reached the kitchen.
Elmer bit his lip. He didn't speak because he knew he would break down alongside her. All he could do was hold her as tightly as possible and rock their bodies gently until she calmed down. What are they saying? Ellie's fingernails dug into the front of his shirt.
That I must confess.
Confess to what, Ellie? What's weighing you down, honey? I'm so confused. Ellie pushed his chest away gently. She looked up at him, tears rolling down her face. Come on, Elmer said. Let's go inside. I'll make tea and we can...
No.
Ellie wiped her nose with the sleeve of her blouse.
I don't want to go back in the house right now.
All right, stay here. I'll go get blankets and put the kettle on the stove.
No.
She inhaled twice and then looked him dead in the eye. Something big was coming. Elmer could feel it.
You know, Mother never approved of us, of our marriage.
Yes, I know.
She always said I have to be smart. You already know what my father did. He took everything when he left us. And Mother always said I must trust no man. Ever.
Elmer's forehead felt hot.
It's her fault. She said I need to save money. She said saving money behind the man's back is always a good idea, regardless of how things turn out. She made me think that you would one day just get up and leave me and the kids behind, or that if you don't end up being a good husband, I must take the kids and leave you.
And did you reach a verdict yet? Do I make a good husband, or are you still putting money aside, just in case? Ellie lowered her head in shame. How much? She was crumbling under his stare. Eliza, how much?
Last time I counted, somewhere around 90,000.
When was the last time you counted?
2 years ago, when you and Catherine went to...
2 years ago. We've been married for 39 years. She started sobbing again. Elmer's tone was calm, but deep down, he was boiling with rage. Throughout our married life, we had 2 loans from the bank, Eliza. The first, when we bought the house, and the second, when our oldest went to college. I paid off both of them. All by myself. Now you're telling me that as I was working my ass off to provide for our family, you were putting a fortune together just in case you decided you don't like me?
It's not like that.
Then what is it like? Tell me.
Your salary was higher than mine.
Elmer's mind, heart, and body went numb. Not by a lot, Ellie, and we both know that. Ellie regretted that last sentence of hers, and she would regret it for the rest of her days.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Elmer. Forgive me.
It's all in your mother's couch, isn't it?
Yes, it's all there. Take it, Elmer. You can have it all. Just please forgive me.
There was nothing pretty about watching the love of his life cry. Ellie went through enough the past few weeks, and having her husband angry with her wouldn't soothe things in the least. Elmer was already looking for excuses in his mind to convince himself that Ellie was indeed an angel, but with a demonic mother. Tell me something, Eliza. Would you have ever told me about the money if the voices didn't tell you to confess? She hesitated.
Yes, I would have, eventually.
Elmer inhaled deeply and exhaled steam. Apparently, he didn't know his wife as well as he thought he did, but he knew enough to tell when she was lying. Never in a million years would he have thought that the dusty old couch they kept in the hallway was an undercover deposit box. But he wanted to believe her so badly. He wanted to believe that she was sorry. He wanted to believe that she would have eventually told him why she didn't want to throw the couch away. But his heart was just as smart as the rest of him. If it weren't for the voices, Ellie would have never told him about the money. Where did you put the Johnny Walker?
In the coffee cupboard, behind the paper bag on the left.
Good. I need a drink.
Of course, honey, I'll get the...
Alone. Ellie looked like a kicked puppy. I need to be alone. I need to think. Stay here, if you can't go back in the house yet. And just like that, for the very first time in almost half a century, Elmer turned his back on his wife. He had his suspicions, all right, but this blow was quite unexpected. The phone rang. Elmer picked up. Donovan residence. A choir of angels made itself heard from the other end of the line.
Hi, Dad. It's me.
It was the very first good thing that happened to him those last few weeks. Catherine, my baby girl, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you?
I'm good, really good. I'm happy I finally got you on the phone for once. We haven't talked in ages.
You're not the only one who's happy, kiddo. Nostalgia is no joke once your favorite kid moves out of the house.
Dad, you're being super unfair to Ed and Eric right now.
Oh, come on, as if they didn't always know who my favorite is. Lucky for me, they share my adoration for you, so they never blame me. Catherine laughed and Elmer's heart grew twice its size.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. I just got off the phone with Eric. He won a super difficult case today.
He did? That's fantastic. I'm not surprised, though. Your mother and I always struggled to scold him whenever he got into trouble. He always knew how to twist an argument in his favor, even in his kindergarten years. The other end of the line went silent for a couple of seconds. Kathy Cat, you still there, honey?
Dad? Is someone next to you?
Elmer's throat went dry. No, not right now. Why?
I think I can hear something, like a man's voice. It's faint, but deep and guttural.
The now familiar coldness was gathering in the pits of his arms again. What does it say, honey?
It says...
Ellie came out of the kitchen.
Something about a confession?
Honey, I have to go. I'll call you back tomorrow, all right?
Dad, is everything okay?
Elmer.
Ellie's voice was coming from a broken cavern inside her chest. She was walking slowly towards him, like an infant trying to walk again after falling for the very first time. Her eyes were purple from all the crying she did. Yes, honey, don't worry. We'll talk tomorrow. Catherine protested, but Elmer placed the receiver down before she finished her sentence. Ellie was shaking as if thousands of volts were going through her.
I can't.
Drool was connecting her inferior lip to her upper one, like a spider web.
I can't take it anymore, Elmer. They've gotten so loud. Elmer, they're everywhere. They're screaming, Elmer. They're so loud.
Elmer watched her with sad eyes. Eliza, I'm sorry, but I really can't hear anything. In her despair, Ellie let out a scream, cupped her hands over her ears, and collapsed on the floor. Elmer rushed to her side and tried embracing her, but she pushed him away.
Make it stop, please. Make them stop.
Why? What are they saying?
That I must confess.
Elmer was confused. He tried pulling his wife into his arms again, but she grabbed him by the hands, interrupting the hug midway. You already confessed, honey. Ellie pressed her lips together and shook her head forcefully. And it's all right. I understand, and I forgive you. I forgive you, Ellie. I love you. But this has got to stop. We really need to get you professional help.
I cheated on you.
Elmer froze. Ellie put her head in her hands as her violent sobs echoed in the hallway. And there it was. Elmer's suspicions finally confirmed. When? Ellie was rocking back and forth, crying with the passion of an entire chorus in a Greek tragedy. Elmer's patience was over and done. He grabbed his wife by the elbow and forced her to look at him. When, Eliza? He didn't ask with whom. He didn't care whom she cheated with. Knowing how cold his wife was regarding matters of the heart, she would have confessed her infidelity years ago. However, the messy circus she was providing made it clear. There was something bigger than cheating to the story. Elmer felt life itself draining out of him as the seconds passed by. Please, Eliza, please tell me Catherine is my daughter. Ellie didn't answer. She just cried harder and tried taking Elmer back on his hug offer. That was enough of an answer. Elmer got to his feet before she even had a chance to touch him.
I confess, I confess, I confess. Please, Elmer, please make them stop.
Elmer had to choose one of two options. One, call an ambulance for his deranged wife and tell her that he forgives her, so that she gets hospitalized with a little peace of mind. And two, grab his coat and go to the bar down the street where the guests were few and the barkeeper wasn't talkative. Choosing was easy. He could still hear Ellie screaming even as he closed the front gate behind him.
I confessed, you rotten beings from hell. What else do you want from me? Shut up, shut up, shut up!
Elmer got back home around 2 a.m. He wasn't exactly drunk, but he wasn't sober either. The house was quiet, just like he expected it to be. He looked in the kitchen for his wife, even though he was certain she wouldn't be there. He didn't bother checking the bedroom or the living room for that matter. Elmer went straight for the attic. He hesitated in the doorway. Even though he knew she was there, he still needed confirmation before he would proceed any further. Elmer cracked the door open, just enough to let a thread of light in. Ellie's left house slipper was on the floor. Her right one was still attached to her, dangling slightly from the ceiling. Elmer saw enough, so he shut the door. He had to wait for the alcohol to wear off. before he would enter the attic again. Otherwise, Ellie wouldn't be the only mess that had to be cleaned up. He had to call so many people. Ambulance, police, funeral home, Eric, Edward, Catherine. There were so many preparations that needed to be done, so many flowers that needed to be bought, so much black cloth that needed to be ironed. But first things first, Elmer got his toolbox and grabbed a screwdriver. He had to remove all the speakers he installed under the house's wooden floorboards. The end. "Your son appears to be quite exceptional, Mrs. Warren," Dr. Etheridge said, looking up through wire-framed glasses, his index finger pointing at the test results in front of them. "He has the gift." Mrs. Warren leaned forward in her seat on the other side of the desk. "Ain't my son." She glanced to the side where 7-year-old Andrew sat on a leather couch, entranced by his Nintendo. "My sister's kid. God rest her soul." Etheridge watched her make the sign of the cross, thin, withered fingers moving over her chest. Her face was drawn, eyes sunken. She looked as if she hadn't slept in days. "Perhaps your husband should join us," Etheridge said, gesturing toward the door leading to the waiting room outside his office where his assistant, Mrs. Anderson, sat. "I think you'll both want to hear what this institute has to offer." She glanced back at the door. "Nah, I think he's happier out there. Got eyes for your secretary, he has." Dr. Etheridge cleared his throat, trying to ignore Mrs. Warren's comment. Whatever the state of the Warrens' farm life rural marriage was, it certainly wasn't any concern of his. The only thing at the moment that did concern him was the boy. "Can I have some ice cream?" Andrew said without looking up, his blonde hair hanging over one eye. "When we're done, Andy," Mrs. Warren said. She turned her tired gaze back to Etheridge, grimacing. "Can we get on with it, please?" Etheridge pushed his glasses up. "Yes, of course." He leaned forward, glancing down at the test results. "His scores are the highest I've seen, on all levels. Telekinesis, remote viewing." Mrs. Warren snickered. "Those tests are bullshit, Doctor. Finding stars and squiggly lines on the back of cards, bending spoons. He can do that nonsense in his sleep." There was a crash outside in the waiting room. It sounded as if Mrs. Anderson had knocked her file organizer off the desk again. Second time this week. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Warren, you were saying?" "I've seen him lift a tractor and hurl it into the barn like it was nothing." "Can I get chocolate ice cream?" Andrew asked. "In a few minutes," Mrs. Warren snapped. "A tractor?" Etheridge sat forward in his seat. "Not just big stuff, and not just out here." She leaned forward, placing a hand on the desk. "He can move folks' insides, blood, organs, bone." Etheridge removed his glasses. "What?" "Didn't that secretary of yours tell you nothing?" She lowered her voice. "It's how he lost his parents." "Can I get hot fudge on my ice cream?" Andrew said. "Yes, in a minute," Mrs. Warren said, glancing back at the boy, then slowly turning back to Etheridge. "The doctor that works on the dead folk, the—" "Coroner?" "Yes, he couldn't explain it." "Explain what, Mrs. Warren?" "Why, my sister and her husband's hearts were turned completely round. Said it looked like they'd been spun like a child's toy." Etheridge narrowed his eyes, not able to believe what he was hearing. "We didn't think nothing of it until Andy brought me a chicken from the barn for supper. Thought my husband had snapped its neck, but when I opened it up, it was like its gizzards had been put in a blender. They poured out like stew from a pot." Etheridge took a deep breath, sat back in his chair. He had seen this kind of irrational fear manifested before. The guardians of these unique children were often torn between loving them and fearing them. He brought his hands up behind his head. "This is exactly the kind of thing that we enable our students to deal with. Society's misunderstanding of their gifts can cause all kinds of developmental problems." He sat forward, peered into her exhausted eyes. I can give Andrew a better life here, a meaningful life, one that...
I don't give a mule's ass about what you can do for him,
Mrs. Warren said through clenched teeth, lips receding, revealing discolored gums. Etheridge was caught off guard. If it's a matter of money... She slapped her hand on his desk.
We didn't come here so you could help him. We're here so you can help us.
Help you? Etheridge said. Mrs. Warren, you have me at a slight disadvantage. She narrowed her eyes.
Thought you were smart. Thought you'd know how to fix this. People say you folks deal with this kind of stuff. That is why we come to you.
Mrs. Warren, what is going on? Impatience rippled across her features.
My husband and I died 2 days ago, and the boy won't let us leave.
What?
He's using those gifts, as you call them, to hold our souls inside these rotting husks, and it's painful. Painful as hell.
Etheridge chuckled. Oh, Mrs. Warren, please.
Go on,
she said, laying her arm out on the desk, palm up.
You is some kind of a doctor. Find a pulse.
Better just humor her for a few minutes, he thought, until he figured out what to do. Etheridge sighed and reached for the woman's wrist. His fingers instinctively recoiled as he touched her skin. She was cold. Real cold. Etheridge shrugged off his initial reaction, letting his logic once again guide his actions. He reached out and took her wrist, his fingers feeling for the rhythmic sensation of flowing blood.
You know the dead can't sleep, doctor, she said. I'm so goddamn tired. Never been so tired.
Etheridge wasn't getting anything. He got up, moved around the desk, placed his hand on her neck. With his thumb, he pressed on her jugular. Nothing. Still refusing to believe, he leaned over, pressed the intercom button on the phone. Mrs. Anderson, will you go down to the ward and get me a stethoscope? He released the button and waited for a reply. None came. Mrs. Anderson, I need you... He suddenly broke off as the sensation of a dog sniffing at his crotch seized his attention. He looked down and saw Mrs. Warren drawing back, her nose still sniffing the air. Mrs. Warren.
You wouldn't believe what being dead makes you hunger for, doctor.
Etheridge stepped back, disgusted. The sooner he got the boy away from them, the better. He turned to move toward the office door. He grasped the handle and swung it open. Mrs. Anderson, I've been called... His mouth dropped open. His eyes bulged. Mrs. Anderson was sprawled on her desk, dead eyes staring at the ceiling. Mr. Warren was using his hands like rib spreaders while his face sank into her exposed cavity. Etheridge could hear the sounds of chewing.
I'll make you a deal, doctor.
Etheridge spun around and found Mrs. Warren standing, her lifeless, hungry stare boring into him.
You get Andy to let us move on, she said, and I won't eat you.
Paralyzed by horror, Etheridge watched her walk toward him. His heart pounded and he thought it would burst from his chest. Mrs. Warren reached out for him and he tried to raise his hands, but they remained at his side, useless. She clutched his arms in her dead fingers and moved his stiff body out of the way. She then exited the office and joined her husband at the feast. Etheridge staggered back, not knowing where his feet were taking him. His heels collided with a leather couch and he plopped down into it. The beeping sounds from Andrew's Nintendo were just a bit louder than the sounds of tearing flesh, snapping bone, and chewing, resonating from the waiting room. He looked over at the boy, still peering intently into the glowing screen of the handheld video game. Etheridge took a deep breath. When he breathed out, he was no longer a paralyzed idiot, and once again a world-renowned parapsychologist. Andrew, he began. The boy continued playing. Andrew, are you doing something to your aunt and uncle? I don't want them to leave, Andrew said, not looking up. And why is that? Because everyone leaves me. His forehead wrinkled. My dog Skipper left. Mom and Dad left. They left me alone. Tell you what, Etheridge said. Why don't you come live here with me and why should I? He had never had to convince a child. it was always a parent or guardian that needed the persuading. Because I have ice cream. Andrew stopped playing and turned to look at him. What flavors? Oh, let me see. There is chocolate, vanilla, I like Rocky Road. Got that one? Well, let's take a walk down to the cafeteria and see what we have. What do you say? Andrew stared at Etheridge, considering. Any progress, Doctor? Mrs. Warren said, stepping back into the office. Her husband was on her heels. Both corpses glared at Etheridge, hands glistening with blood, chins dripping. Dr. Etheridge hardened his tone and tried to appear firm. Andrew, you have to let them go. Let them go, right now. Etheridge could hear the dead bodies of the Warrens shuffling forward, and he tried to tune it out. He stayed focused on the boy, eyes locked. Putting a hand on Andrew's shoulder, he said, I'm not going to leave you. I promise. He brushed the boy's wayward strand of hair from his eyes. You can live here and have ice cream every day. Andrew seemed to smile. It was the first expression Etheridge had seen in the boy. But first, Etheridge said, seeing the Warrens' shadows fall over the couch, you must let them go. It's not right to hold them on this plane. Do you understand? Andrew's expression soured like a kid being asked to clean his room. He then turned and faced his dead aunt and uncle. He blinked twice. Go away. I don't need you anymore. The corpses stopped moving for an instant and just seemed to stand there like marionettes whose puppeteer had fallen asleep. Then, their strings cut, they slumped to the floor, their dead limbs intertwined as if in a farewell embrace. Mrs. Warren's tired eyes shuddered, then went still, her dead gaze locked on Etheridge. He could see the emptiness in that gaze, cold, vacuous, and he could almost feel the hollow husks rotting. Andrew hopped up, sticking the Nintendo in his pocket. Etheridge stood up slowly, eyes fixed on the bodies in his office. Can we go get some ice cream now? Andrew grabbed Etheridge's hand. The parapsychologist nodded, hoping to God that the cafeteria stocked ice cream. Being a diabetic, he had never noticed. Of course, we will go take a look. There is a chance that they have run out, in which case we will just... I hope not, Andrew interrupted. I haven't had any since Auntie and Uncle ran out 2 days ago. His expression became irritated. And that made me really, really mad. The end. This doesn't look safe. I looked into the cave that cut into the side of the massive round hill. Above it, a tree had grown roots downward, trying to fill up the void, but it had instead simply created a fanciful framing, like something out of a story that started with the words, "Once upon a time." I never guaranteed it would be safe. I said it would be an adventure. And when was the last time you heard about a safe adventure? Adam wasn't exactly wrong, and I had been the one to say that I was bored. You also said you were going to show me a fairy knoll, and instead we're looking at a cave, I pointed out. I grabbed the flashlight from my belt and checked to make sure it was in working order. Shining it into the cave, the beam of light traveled until it reached a dead end. The crazy number of lumens the thing was capable of was almost dazzling while looking into the darkness of the cave. I flipped it to a lower light level and snapped it to my shoulder. The cave goes into the knoll. Look, hills like this, these ones that seem perfectly round, like a bubble sitting on an otherwise flat area, are fairy knolls. Back when fairy creatures still wandered the forest, I don't think that ever happened actually, I interjected, which caused Adam to glare at me. Not all of us are as close-minded as you are, he informed me. Anyway, the fairy royalty would build their kingdoms into these places, and they would come out to dance and party under the moonlight, then retreat back into the caves at dawn. The knolls were all interconnected, woven through passages that connected to similar hills all over the world. So you're hoping to find little fluttering fairies in these caves and not, bears? Because This is black bear territory." Before he could answer, I added, "Also, I'm certain we passed a few posted signs on the way here. Adam, are we trespassing?" "That's a weird way to say adventuring, my friend." Adam looked sincerely disappointed in me. "Besides, it's only really trespassing if you're caught." "I don't think that is a legally defensible argument." I sighed and shrugged. I was in this thing, even if I was giving Adam a hard time. We had been friends since we were in the 2nd grade, and I had always let Adam drag me into trouble. The thing was, the trouble always ended in great memories. "How did you even find this place?" "I saw the hill from the road on bike and had to find a way to get in here. It took me ages to find a good route to hike in, but it was worth it. This cave is even better than the last one I found." His excitement was barely contained. "The last one was more of a hole in a rock with a bunch of spiders inside, so..." I threw my backpack on and turned to the cave. "Every cave is just a hole in a rock with a bunch of spiders. I think that is literally the definition of a cave. Now come on, stop bitching and adventure." Adam started off ahead of me, walking headlong into the unknown with his normal reckless abandon. I looked back to where I'd left my car hidden in some nearby brush. I missed it already. Eventually, though, as I always did, I came following after. Passing beneath the curtain of roots from the tree over the entrance did give the impression of passing from one world into another. Adam had a spool of string with him. He tied the end to one of the roots and then hung the spool from a peg on his belt. This was a clever trick he had started doing when he began wandering through unfamiliar woods. He carried several spools and just kept connecting them as he went. On the way back, he'd wind them up, but he never got lost. Not anymore. When we were younger, we had gotten lost a few times. I half expected this cave to come to a dead end after 10 or 20 feet inside. What were the odds of stumbling into a major cave system by accident? When we got further inside and discovered that the cave narrowed and turned to the left, I wasn't sure if I was happy or worried. Adam was clearly excited by the prospect of a longer adventure. "See? Fairy Knoll. It will spread all through this hill. Let's go find some fairies." Adam flashed his uneven grin at me, uneven because of an accident with a moped his senior year of high school. I gave a look back over my shoulder at the dwindling light of the world beyond the caves, realizing that following this curve would block out the last of the natural light, and then proceeded after Adam. We had his string. We could find our way out, though it occurred to me that a cave of this size could very easily be a home to all kinds of dangerous animals. Caves like this were perfect homes for large predators. We passed a branch in the path, and Adam took us down the left side. It was strange how much like a hall it felt. The ground was easy enough to walk on, and the paths, though narrow in places, were comfortably sloped. It felt like we had been walking for quite a while. I wished I had checked my cell phone to see what time it was when we entered. I pulled it out and gave a look at the time. It was 2 in the afternoon. The best I could guess was that we'd been in the cave for 15 minutes. It really was deep, though it didn't seem to move downwards. We reached another branch, and again Adam chose the left-hand side. There was a faint unpleasantness in the air, and it almost felt like Adam was following that for some reason. I looked back down the string trail. I was glad for it, though so far it would be easy enough to find our way back. 2 rights and then straight on out. "Oh shit!" Adam shouted, and I jumped, splashing the cave in shadows as my flashlight arm went astray. "What?" I shouted, more angry than scared now that I had had a moment to gather myself. Adam laughed a little. "Sorry, rat. It was a big one, though. Ran right over my foot." I sighed. "Maybe we should just go back. I don't know what you're hoping to find in this hole in the ground. A little fairy girlfriend?" I asked, shifting my flashlight so that I could see more of the cave we were in. The narrow passageway we had just been in had opened out into a larger area. The stink had been getting stronger, and now it was quite bad. "Come on, a little further. I want to know what that smell is." Adam urged me on, ever chasing the next terrible smell. "Smells like roadkill, and that worries me. I know I joked about bears earlier, but what if there is a bear in here?" I was becoming increasingly worried about that. The carcass smell, the rat, that could easily mean we were walking into a bear den. I had brought bear mace, but I didn't want to find out if it had ever actually been tested on actual bears. I didn't figure this was the best time to find out either way. Bears? No, what? No way. It's too deep. Bears don't live this deep in caves, Adam explained in such a way that I knew he had no idea what he was talking about. He was moving on again, and I was following him. It was difficult to determine which of us was the biggest idiot, Adam for leading us into danger, or me for following Adam into danger despite the fact that I knew better. The area around us was opening up even wider so that I could no longer see the walls in my beam. Adam stopped. "Oh man, you were right." "About what?" "Tell me it's not the bears," I said, trying to decide if I should start running in the other direction. I reached into my pack and dug for the bear spray just to be safe. I felt better with it in my hand. "No, the roadkill thing. Well, I mean, it's probably not roadkill, but there are animal carcasses. Look." He flashed his light ahead and I could see the mangled body of a deer. It had been disemboweled and spread across the ground. Hunks were missing from its flesh, differing sizes of damage. Some were small marks, like maybe the rat we had seen before, and some were much larger. There were other dead animals too. I saw a coyote, several rabbits, and a raccoon. All of them were partially eaten, in various states of decay. "I think I was right about the bear too," I said quietly. "Adam, I really think we should get out of here now. Anything that dragged a deer in here is something we don't want to run into." Adam turned towards me, sweeping his light into my face. "Shit!" I cursed, putting a hand up to block the blinding flash. "Sorry," Adam apologized, and the light fell off back to the side, and for a half a second I saw something on the ground. "You're right, we should be getting out of here. I guess this is just a bear cave." I barely heard him. I turned in the direction that his light had flashed, bringing my own beam down in that direction. At first it was hard to tell what I was seeing, but I got a bit closer and soon it was apparent. "Is that a bone pile?" Adam asked, coming up behind me. It was. The pile was above my waist and it stretched off to one side of the chamber. I flashed my light across it, and it filled the room all the way into a tunnel far at the opposite end from where we had come into the cave. I had never seen so many bones in one place. I couldn't identify half of them. Bone identification wasn't exactly a class they offered me back in college, but some things stuck out. "Damn bear must be hungry," Adam was saying, but I was already shaking my head. "No, Adam, that's a bear skull." I pointed to one of the larger skulls atop the pile. The canines were a dead giveaway. They were far too big to be a dog. It had been a really big black bear. Whatever did this ate the bear. Adam laughed, and then he seemed to catch on to my lack of laughter, and he just said, Oh shit. No. Is that a human skull?" He pointed at the pile, and it took me a moment to figure out exactly what he was looking at, but then I spotted the eye sockets and the rest of it came into focus. There was no mistaking that one. We turned together and started back for the tunnel we had entered through. Adam was rolling up his string quickly as we went. "Good adventure, right?" he said as he worked, punctuating the words with nervous laughter. "As long as we don't get eaten, I will call it a good adventure." I tried to keep my answer light, but it was easy to spook yourself in the dark, especially in a cave with human bones. The bones had pushed me well into the neighborhood of spooked. Something quick and dark darted past the edge of my flashlight beam. It gave me a start, but I cursed quietly to myself and kept moving. Rats. They had come for the meat. I wished them the best in their endeavor, but I, for one, didn't want to become a member of the bone pile crew. We reached the first intersection and followed the string left. I kept looking over my shoulder, certain that something would be back there, but I couldn't see anything. Behind us, where our flashlights didn't reach, was a blackness so profound that trying to find anything in it caused the mind to stutter. There was nothing to grasp onto. We kept traveling as fast as we could, And then we reached an area that looked like a carved-out set of stairs leading upward. We stopped together. Had we come down an area that looked like stairs? The string was still leading up this way. The string. We had followed the string. I frowned as I tried to understand what was happening. Adam started up the steps in front of me. Adam, I don't think we should go up there. We didn't come downstairs to get where we were. Why had the rope led us left at the first intersection? It should have taken us down the right branch. We had turned left to get there to begin with. That doesn't make sense. How would the string get moved? I never felt anything. It has to be right. Maybe we just forgot. He was at the top of the stairs now, looking around with his flashlight. Hey, I think I see a light down this way, he said, moving further away. Hey, let's just try and backtrack and... I didn't get any further than that because Adam screamed. Son of a bitch! Holy shit! He sounded like he was in pain, so I dashed up the stairs to see what was wrong. Adam was clutching the side of his face near his right eye, screaming as he walked in circles. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, it hurts! He yelled at me. What hurts? What's wrong? I ran over to him, trying to see where he was injured, but he had it covered with his hand and I couldn't tell what was bothering him. You have to let me see. I can't help you if you don't show me. I tossed my pack down and was opening it, grabbing out the first aid kit. I set the bear mace down for a moment. I figured he must have hit his head on something. Adam pulled his hands back and let loose a groan of agony, the likes of which I had never heard from him, and I'd been there when he broke his leg skateboarding. I squinted to figure out what I was seeing. The flesh around Adam's eye was bright red, as though he had been in the sun for far too long. It was also puffing up badly. His eye was almost entirely shut already. I looked closer, moving the flashlight in, but I couldn't tell what the heck was causing the swelling. I moved the light and saw a momentary shimmer. I squinted and moved it again, and then I saw it. There was a little strand stuck in Adam's skin, just a little behind his eyebrow. It was almost transparent, only slightly thicker than a piece of hair, but stiff. It looked like a sliver of glass, but it was long. I reached forward to try and grab it, but the moment I touched it, I jumped back in pain. My fingers had thin cuts in them where I'd touched the sliver. They were even bleeding lightly. What the hell? I muttered under my breath, but in the next moment I saw the sliver begin to crawl into Adam's flesh as though it was dragging itself deeper. Adam began to scream again. What is it? What is it? He yelled. It burns, oh God, it burns! I don't know what it is, I told him in a panic. It's some kind of sliver, a little narrow thing like a piece of thin glass. We have to get out of here. Come on, let's go back down these stairs. Adam collapsed to his knees and began to scream even louder. My heart was hammering in my chest. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea how to help my friend. The red blotch on his face was growing, turning purple and almost black in some places. What could do this to a person? Adam, you have to walk. We have to get out of here, I told him, reaching down to grab his arm and urge him up, but he slapped me away. Something inside of the swelling exploded, and I thought it was probably his eyeball. Black ichor poured down the side of his face, and then the skin on that side of his face began to tear. The odor that came from the wound turned my stomach. It ruptured forcefully, hunks of rotten flesh falling away as it began to drain out onto the ground. I could see Adam's skull, and that too was turning black and soft. He collapsed, finally going quiet, and I sat there staring in horror as his skull crumpled and black moldering brain poured out. Something dark darted from along the path and moved towards the body. My first inclination was to think it was a rat, but it wasn't. It moved on 4 legs, but they were insect-like, blacker than night, just like its torso, which rose from the center of those 4 legs. Its head was a black shard with horns atop it, but no eyes, and a mouth that was all teeth. It skittered towards Adam and opened its mouth, grabbing onto his hand. It tore a piece of his flesh and blended it into pulp in that grinder of a mouth. Then others came. They came from the walls, pouring down the tunnels and clawing their way to the body as I slowly backed away. They were about the size of one of my open hands. One of them moved in my direction. It had a single arm that ended in what looked like a little pointed spiral. It pointed that spiral at me. On some random impulse, I put my arm up. A strange popping sound came from the little creature, and when the thread-like projectile hit, it burrowed into the band on my watch, and fortunately not my flesh. I grabbed the clasp and tore the watch off just in time to see the tip of that little dart come ripping through the watch band. It had tiny legs that crawled forward. I dropped the watch, grabbed my mace and pack, and ran. I went back down the stairs and then down the hall, taking the next left. That, I thought, would put me back on the proper course. I ran through the dark, a strange chittering at my back. Fairies. These things were fairies. How the tales had ever shifted to turn them into little child-friendly characters, I had no idea. These things were nightmares. Oh no, Adam. Adam was gone. Music started down the halls, though perhaps music wasn't the best term. It was like something had heard music once and only once, and then had tried to emulate that memory with none of the proper tools or knowledge. I had been moved by music before to the point where it almost made me cry, and this sound was like that, but instead of crying, the noise made me want to stop and dance. It made me feel light of heart. It made me want to go and see where this otherworldly sound was coming from. In fact, I caught myself just standing in the tunnel. I wasn't sure how long I'd been there, unmoving and in a trance, but I was certain that it had been far too long. I began to move again, the music still pulling at me, trying to persuade me to come back. I thought I was resisting it. I really believed that I was headed for the way out, but then I found myself in the room of bones again, and this time I wasn't alone. When I first saw them, I thought perhaps the stories of elves and fairies were somewhat accurate. They stood with light behind them, and they were only a silhouette to my eyes. However, when I shifted my flashlight up to them, I soon realized they were nothing of what they seemed. Their outline hid a truth so alien that I struggled to understand what they were. Each one was as tall as I was, and they stood atop a set of chitinous legs that tucked together in such a way to make them seem like two normal legs. But there were 6 of them that had joined to a long, narrow body lined in clawed appendages about the length of a man's forearms. Their larger forearms were long and narrow, ending in 3 fingers that at first seemed as long as a human's, but again, those folded out into 3 saber-like claws. Their heads were made up of a set of wind chambers, something like a group of bell-shaped flutes that rose through the area that should have been a face. This was how they made their music, I realized, and why it sounded like nothing of our world. How could it, when these things were clearly nothing like mankind had known before? They had black eyes dashed across their head and torso, small dots peering in 100 different directions, and their mouths were just gaping holes in their necks that were lined with mismatched teeth. Some were human-like, some pointed like a dog's, and some looked like they belonged to animals I'd never seen or heard of. There were 8 of them in the room, and I could tell that they were all focused on me. They all began to sing at once, and the sound hit me like a wave.
Human.
A voice hummed, more insect buzz than actual human tone.
You are among the Fae. We have collected your gift, drank of its sweet nectar. Now we will return your favor.
The voice was like a hooked line passing through my head, ripping at my thoughts as it tore its way through the back of my skull. What gift were they talking about? I tried to understand what they meant, what was happening, but the only thing I could think of was Adam. Did they think I'd brought Adam for them? One of the things moved forward, extending a clawed hand in my direction.
Take our hand, child. We will lead you to Elfheim. You will know such delights.
The voices fell apart again, returning to the madness of the Fae song. It tugged at me, trying to pull me towards the offered hand. Some lucid part of my mind acted out of a sense of self-preservation. The music of the creatures faltered, and the air was filled with unpleasant screeching. It was only as the music faded that I saw that my arm was raised and that I was spraying the bear mace at the creatures in the cave. Run! I actually said the word aloud, and then I was doing exactly that. I turned and fled back the way I'd come, almost tripping over the bone mound in my haste. A group of black shapes came climbing out of the dark, raising tiny spiked arms in my direction. I dove away from them before they could fire their little darts at me. I heard them go off, tiny pops like someone cracking their knuckles, and then I charged forward and kicked them, scattering them out of my way. One hopped up onto my leg and took a bite out of the side of it, chewing through the pants with no problem at all. I screamed and smacked it away, which resulted in more flesh tearing, but managed to dislodge the creature. I ran, taking the first right and crashing over my own feet to sprawl on my knees. The can of bear mace rolled away from me, and I went chasing after it as I heard an awful skittering sound from the tunnel behind me. Fear propelled me. I got up and ran again, leaving the bear mace behind me. I wasn't sure it would work a second time anyway. I hit the next junction and took a right again, but I could hear them getting closer. The song was starting up again. The strangely powerful and enchanting music grabbed hold of me and tried to turn me in place. I thought of Adam, the way he had died, and I kept moving. It was like trying to swim up a waterfall. The struggle was so hard that I barely noticed the point at which I stumbled from the cave and landed in the sun of the woods beyond the creeping curtain roots of the tree. I gasped for breath, feeling as though something had been sitting on my chest this entire time. In a panic, I clambered back to my feet and turned around. The cave was dark. I flashed my light down the tunnel, and there, at the back of the cave, stood a human-looking figure. In the shadows, as far away as it was, it could have been anything.
You can't leave.
A sing-song voice rippled up out of the cave.
You will forget us, but we won't forget you.
I turned away and started back for the car. I had no idea what I would tell people about Adam. I knew I couldn't tell them the truth. No one would believe me. Maybe some of our friends would listen. I'd have to tell them something. By the time I got the car started, I felt exhausted. I was almost happy that Adam hadn't shown up today after all. I wasn't in the mood for one of his adventures. They were always more trouble than the story that came out of them was worth. Mind-numbing white light from simultaneous shell bursts scattered the men, some dead before they hit the ground, others screaming for a medic. The soldier flinched and involuntarily turned his head away, using his hands to shield his eyes. Beneath him, the earth rumbled and shook. More men appeared beside him, running toward the source of the unrelenting volley of enemy bullets. An explosion above them rained force debris down on those beneath. Unsteady, he glanced to his left to see a fellow GI's chest explode, raining blood and tissue on anyone near him. Vertigo rocked his senses as he tried to get a grip on place and time. He fell face down onto the snow-covered, leaf-strewn forest floor. The clatter of tanks, human screams, and orders shouted in panic overwhelmed him. All around, the chaos of mechanized warfare bombarded his senses. Flashes, followed by the cracks of bullets on their way to unseen targets, created a violent thunderstorm in what otherwise would be a quiet woodland. "Run!" his mind screamed. Despite the cold, sweat stung his eyes. Wiping his forehead with his sleeve, it came back smeared in dirt and other men's blood. Survival instincts took over as bullets whizzed by over his head. "Run!" A glance behind and another ahead overwhelmed him with indecision. "Do something. This will get you killed." The shouts of his fellow soldiers intensified as more men succumbed to the withering barrage of bullets. He decided to escape in the direction from which he had came. No. He couldn't. The soldier drew an unsteady breath. The only thing stronger than a need for self-preservation remained his fear of being called a coward by his fellow soldiers. As men raced past him toward the chaos, he rose to his knees, bloody knuckles pressing into the dirty and leaf-littered snow. Finally, he pushed himself to a standing position. Off to the left, a large tree offered a temporary hiding place to check himself for injuries. He slipped beneath the wide branches and patted down his body. No significant wounds. Every explosion in the nearby forest shuddered the ground beneath him. He pressed his back into the mighty oak, but found no reassurance. He shut his eyes tight as bullets struck nearby trees, creating geysers of loosened tree bark to sting his exposed skin. Clamping his palms over his ears, he gasped for a breath. The tightness in his stomach intensified as he could still hear the cries of dying men calling for their mothers. "Franklin, get your ass going. This isn't break time." The voice of his squad's master sergeant on his right snapped him out of his paralysis. He stepped beyond the safety of the tree just as he heard a muffled grunt. The master sergeant fell to the ground next to him, a gaping hole in the man's chest, and lifeless eyes pointed toward the sky. Dusk descended over the woods, which added a surreal quality to his surroundings. Desperation for survival prevailed over his worry of being considered a coward. He picked up his rifle with both hands and ran from the carnage. Navigating through the growing darkness and trying to avoid stumbling over bodies made for slow going. Finally, he broke out of a tree line. He stopped at the edge of the dirt path, looked both ways for the enemy, then glanced at the sky where the moon glowed through a thin layer of clouds. He crossed the narrow opening into another canopy of trees. Relief settled over him when he saw other men, just like himself, fleeing the battle. An unknown force pushed him forward. He stumbled. Searing pain traveled up his spine. He fell to the snow-covered ground. Breathing grew difficult, and a calmness swept over him. Finally, he lay still. He stood in a kaleidoscope of swirling colors. Within the lights, he heard voices beckoning him to approach the brightness. His long-dead mother called his name, and he felt her hand on his cheek. Scenes from his childhood flashed past as he walked toward the center of the brilliance. He gasped with the next vision, his girlfriend offering her unclothed body to him on the night prior to leaving for boot camp. He watched as a door closed. The bright colors ceased and cold engulfed him once again. His heart skipped a beat when he witnessed the events of that fateful night in Chicago. His final image before total darkness overtook him was the gangplank on the ship he would board for the journey to the battlefields of Europe. Struggling to regain awareness, he remembered the date to be December 16, 1944. The location he and other members of the 9th Infantry Regiment were assigned by Allied command was the Ardennes region of northeastern France. History would record this date as the start of the infamous Battle of the Bulge. Drifting in and out of consciousness, he lay in the snow, succumbing to a feeling of ultimate peace. Against his wishes, he awoke. Silence dominated his surroundings. He rose to his knees as cold, stiffened joints quickly turned the effort into a painful ordeal. Challenged by the agony, he struggled to stand. The butt of his M1 Garand lay close by. When he reached for it, pain seared through his body. Slowly, the agony subsided, and he used the rifle to push himself erect and surveyed his surroundings. Except for unmoving bodies posed in grotesque statues of death, he stood alone. The snow-covered forest floor, crimson with the frozen blood of dozens of his fallen brethren, met his gaze. The vertigo returned. Trembling, he reached into his front pocket for his compass, but found the glass cracked and the needle clattering around inside the small container. With a curse, he flicked the useless object into the brush. Orienting himself, he looked to the sky to find a gray overcast so thick the globe of the sun remained hidden. He knew the north to south path he crossed earlier lay behind him. So he turned to what he guessed to be west and set off to find other soldiers and an aid station. 30 minutes into his trek, he reached behind for his canteen, only to find a huge hole. Tipping the container up, not even a drop of water remained. After taking a deep breath, he let it out slowly and stood still for a moment. Studying the terrain, he listened for distant sounds of men or tools of war. Silence. Even the sound of birds and animals were missing. Putting one foot forward, he started to walk. After navigating the woodland for hours, he could not tell if he was making progress or just walking in circles. Several times he thought he recognized a fallen burned oak he had passed earlier. The sensation unnerved him. As dusk approached, he determined maneuvering through the thick timberland at night would be a fool's errand. He stopped to gather leaves and a few pieces of dry wood. No easy task, as much of the surroundings were covered with snow. Eventually, his hard work paid off when the pile of wood and leaves flared. Satisfied with his efforts, he watched the flames grow. With the fire established, he used his mess kit to melt snow for drinking water. No matter how much melted snow he drank, his thirst would not subside. Time passed slowly as the only discernible light emanated from the flames. The snap of a twig nearby brought him to full alert. He grabbed his rifle and pointed it in the sound's direction. "Who's there? Can you spare a wee bit of warmth with a fellow?" Standing, the soldier kept his weapon trained in the direction of the voice. "Come into the light, slowly. Show me your hands." The firelight flickered on something to the soldier's right. Pointing the gun in the direction of the object and voice, the shadow materialized into a man as it grew closer. The glow revealed a guy dressed in a mud-caked khaki uniform with leggings, a Brody helmet, and an Enfield rifle in one hand. The man said, "I don't mean to alarm you, laddie. I've heard that accent before, Southside Chicago. You're Irish, aren't you?" "Aye, you're a doughboy, right?" "Haven't heard the term for a while, but yeah, that's a strange uniform you're wearing." The man shrugged. "Only one I've got." "Sit, rest for a while." "I believe I will, thanks," the soldier said. "I'm with the 9th Infantry. 77th Division, 1st Battalion for me. Wish I had food to offer." The Irishman tilted his head. I know what you mean." He paused and gazed at the fire for a few minutes. "How long you been out here?" "Yesterday afternoon. We fell under attack and I got separated from my unit. I've been out here all night and day, lost. Yourself?" The newcomer didn't answer right away. "Yesterday, huh?" "Yeah." "You mentioned Chicago. That's where you're from?" The soldier smiled. "The name's Franklin." "I'm from Dublin myself. O'Reilly's mine." "Nice to meet you, O'Reilly. I've never been to Dublin." "Nor I Chicago." "You haven't missed anything." The soldier kept his attention on the fire and placed a few more large tree limbs onto the flames. "I can't seem to get warm." "It's winter in France, laddie. No one can." He poked at the blaze with a stick. Sparks scattered and glowed with the disturbance. The Irishman looked at his companion. "Good fire. Thanks for sharing." "You're welcome." He paused. "What's Dublin like?" The Irishman smiled. "Warmer than here." Franklin shivered. "Why is it so damn cold?" He paused as he concentrated on the flames. Finally, he asked, "Have you looked for your unit?" "Yes, but I'm sure they pulled out a long time ago." "You can hook up with mine as soon as I find them?" The soldier frowned as he observed the Irishman. He said, "You don't have an overcoat." A shrug answered the question. He held his hands closer to the fire and then studied the soldier. "Have you seen much combat?" "No, this is my first." He paused. "I've seen death up close before, but nothing like I saw yesterday." He took a deep breath, avoiding the Irishman's eyes as he let it out. O'Reilly did not respond except to stare at the flames. The two men remained silent for an extended length of time as the glow and the crackling flames seemed to be their only connection to the world. His thoughts drifted back to one night in Chicago. Finally, the soldier said, "Chicago can be a rough place." "Aye, so can Dublin." "Yeah, I can imagine." He looked at his companion. "Can I tell you something?" "Not the priest." "I know that, but I need to tell someone." "Go ahead. I might not listen." "That's okay." The Irishman concentrated his attention on the flames. Franklin said, "I got into a little trouble one night on the docks of Lake Michigan. You see, I used to work for a man who owned several bars in downtown Chicago. One night he sent me and another guy down there to pick up a load of bootleg booze from Canada. It seems he still had his contacts from Prohibition and a way to increase his profits by buying untaxed whiskey." Turning his attention to the soldier, the Irishman's expression stayed neutral. "Anyway, a couple of cops interrupted us. Wiping his mouth with his coat sleeve, the soldier continued. Damn, it's cold. A nod came from O'Reilly. The cops wanted us to cut a deal, you know? Let us go and keep the booze. They said they'd look the other way while we got the hell out of there. When I said no, they tried to arrest us. Taking a deep breath, Franklin looked toward the cloud-laden sky. I shot both of them and slipped their bodies into the water. I joined the army the next day and left for boot camp a week later. That explains why you're here? What do you mean? When you told me you hadn't seen much combat, I wondered why you're here. I'm not following you. Do you believe in heaven and hell, my American friend? He shrugged. The fire doesn't warm you, does it? O'Reilly asked. No, it doesn't. And you're hungry, right? Famished. Thirsty? The soldier nodded. You probably melted snow to drink, didn't you? Another nod. Afterward, you were still thirsty. Yeah. My friend from Chicago. You were in hell. The soldier blinked rapidly. What do you mean I'm in hell? You're joking, right? O'Reilly smiled. Am I? Think about it. You've been wandering around a forest for over a day looking for a road and can't find it. You see a tree you recognize or a funny-shaped rock you seem to remember. You walk in a straight line and still can't find your way out of the trees. Am I right? I got lost. No, you didn't. He paused. Get used to it. I've been wandering around this forest since 1918. I can't find my way out. And neither will you. Hell is supposed to be hot. Who said so? You a priest? The soldier frowned. I'm not Catholic. Doesn't matter. Hell is what torments us the most. I used to catch small rodents and roast them. It didn't ease my hunger, so I quit trying. I can drink water all day and I'm still thirsty. I can sit by a fire like the one you made and still shiver. We are doomed to walk this forest in the middle of winter for eternity. For a long time, the soldier studied the man who claimed to be from 1918. I don't believe you. His trust in those words not as confident as before. With a shrug, O'Reilly started to stand, but stopped and returned to the ground. Makes no difference if you believe me or not. You're in hell, my friend. The soldier smirked and asked in disbelief, Are there others like you? Thousands. I've seen them wandering around at night. However, you're the first one I've been able to have a conversation with. You're crazy. Am I? Think about it, Franklin. Where are the sounds of war? It's happening all around us, and we can't hear it or see it. We're not part of it anymore. Franklin's eyes widened. He wiped his mouth with his hand. The lips felt cold. Studying the Irishman, he said, This can't be happening. Oh, but it is. I can't be dead. I never got shot. The only bullets you hear are the ones that miss you? Stop it. He placed his palms over his ears and stared at the man sitting on the other side of the fire. I didn't hear the bullet that got to me either. He pointed to his head. Got it right below me helmet. How come I don't see the others you mentioned? You will, but they won't talk to you? You mean I'll be alone? Yes. O'Reilly stood and started to turn. How come you're talking to me? Not sure. I saw your fire and thought I'd try. He paused. Maybe I'm being offered a form of clemency. If I show some kindness to you by explaining what's going on, I might get out of here at some point in the future. After I died, no one told me. I had to figure it out on my own. The soldier got to his feet. Wait, I don't want to be alone. I get the feeling my time is limited to talk to you. This can't be true. I don't feel dead. The Irishman chuckled. How is dead supposed to feel, Franklin? I don't know. None of us know how death feels until we experience it. He turned again to leave. Why are you here? The Irishman looked back at him. I executed 3 German infantrymen after they were taken prisoners. Why? No reason, other than they were German and no one was around to see me do it. Still not believing the man, he reached to stop him from leaving. His hand passed through the Irishman's shoulder. O'Reilly gave the soldier a sad smile. See? I wasn't lying to you. While Franklin searched for words, he watched the figure disappear into the night. For several moments, he listened for sounds around him. Silence. No birds chirped or creatures scurried through the leaves. Only silence. He looked skyward. Clouds raced past a full moon. A tear leaked from his eye and down his cheek. He stood still. For how long, he did not know. A mist formed as the fire flickered out. By the light of the moon, another figure approached his position at a slow walk. Thinking it might be the return of O'Reilly, he stepped away from the tree and watched the form approach. The clothes were wrong. The Irishman had not returned. The figure wore a German uniform. Franklin raised his rifle and shouted, "Stop!" The man ignored him and continued walking. Positioning himself in front of the oncoming soldier, Franklin shouted again, "Stop, or I'll shoot!" The figure did not stop or slow. Finally, it passed through him. The only thing Franklin felt was a cold breeze as he watched the specter disappear into the darkness. If you enjoyed tonight's story, hosted by yours truly, Paul J. McSorley, you can search my name on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on YouTube for additional previous stories. If you'd like to hear more lengthy tales, be sure to take a look at my audiobooks. Available now on audible.com or just visit paulsbooks.net. That's PAULSBOOKS.net. You can also find me personally on Facebook and Twitter. And with that, listeners, our weekly journey into the psyche has just about come to a close. But before we go, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us for tonight's episode and remind you to take a moment to stop by our iTunes page and leave Chilling Tales for Dark Nights a 5-star review and a kind word. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you haven't already. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can find an archive of our work going back to 2012. And consider signing up as a patron at our website, chillingtalesfordarknights.com, to show your support and get all of our content ad-free. I'm your host for Fear from the Heartland, Paul J. McSorley. I've enjoyed the titillation tonight. Ooh, there's that word again. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you again next week at Fear from the Heartland.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.